Alright, welcome back to the channel today, everybody. So today we're doing kind of a fusion dish. We're going to be using some chicken thighs, which is going to have like a Hispanic, French slash Indian type fusion to it tonight. So we're going to take our chicken thigh meat. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start cleaning those up. After we get them all cleaned up, which just means trimming off any bone or any real strong connective tissue we see there, we're going to want to put them on a paper towel to kind of pat dry. We want them dry as possible so that we can sear them really nicely in the pan when we get to that point. Now, some of this fat and stuff that's on the chicken thigh, I'm going to leave on there. That's just going to add more flavor, as well as it will render out whenever we start searing these. So again, we're just going to put it on some paper towel to dry for now. And yeah, that fat, fat equals flavor. So we don't want to get rid of all that fat, but we don't want all this connective tissue in there either. Now, on a thigh piece, you're not going to get off all that silver skin or connective tissue. There will still be some, but the less you have, the more it'll render out as you're frying it. So today we're going to do these thighs with a seasoning of paprika, chili powder, and some garlic powder with some salt and pepper. Now, the method to cooking this today is going to be kind of along the lines of Indian, and some of the ingredients we're adding to it, we're going to actually do more of like a French style pan sauce, like directly in the pan that we're searing in. So it's going to have kind of a combo, but we're also using like more of the Southwest type flavors with paprika and things. We're also going to be using some fresh rosemary, some onion, some shallot, and some lemon juice. And when we get to the point, we're going to go ahead and deglaze the pan after frying them with some white wine. And I'm using a Pinot Grigio today. I didn't want the oaky flavor or buttery flavor that comes out of Chardonnay. And we're not going to be using a lot either. We're just going to be using a very little bit. It's going to give it a nice, balanced flavor. But when we make that sauce, we're going to make it with some butter and some heavy cream. So that's where we start getting those French type methods in there. And be cautious too when you're cleaning up these thighs. The whole point of trying to straighten them out the way I am is to get them as even as possible, laying flat. That way, when we sear them, they will cook evenly, and you won't get some parts that are overdone versus some that are not. So again, cleaning these up, we're going to put them on this paper towel, we're going to pat them dry, and after that we're going to get our seasoning mixed together, and then we will season them. Alright, now that those are getting on the dry side, I'm going to go ahead and get my seasoning mixed together. It's kind of like a dry rub that we're using today. So we're going to be using about a half teaspoon of paprika. I'm just going to get it all in a mixing bowl, and we're going to mix it all together, and then we're going to go ahead and get it on a little sheet tray. And then in that little sheet tray, we're going to be able to season them up real good. So now I'm not always one for measuring. In fact, I very rarely measure. But for this, I don't want to overdo it. So I'm kind of just measuring it out as need be. I'm going to go a half teaspoon of garlic powder. And then we're also doing a half teaspoon of onion powder. And again, we got that half teaspoon of paprika in there. And then when it comes to the salt and pepper, again, I do like to use the pink Himalayan salt. So we're going to kind of eyeball that one. And then for the pepper itself, I'm not going to use the fresh grind like I usually do, even though that is my favorite. I am going to use actual ground black pepper. And on that, we're going to be doing about a quarter of a teaspoon. Quarter teaspoon pepper. And then again, I'm going to eyeball the salt as I add that. That looks to be good. We'll get this all kind of mixed together here, our little dry rub. All right, that's all ready to go. And now we're not going to be completely coating this either. Our goal is to just season them properly. So it's going to be kind of hard to peel off these thighs when you get it off the paper towel there. But what I'm going to do is, as I'm peeling it off, I'm just going to kind of season it by hand. And then whatever's left after that, I will actually kind of sprinkle right over the top. Again, be careful because it's going to stick to that paper, but again, you want these as dry as possible. Now, the salt in itself is going to release some of the moisture, but that's another reason why we're trying to get as much off as we can initially. So go ahead and season these up. We're going to set them aside. I'll show you what it looks like after we get them all seasoned. All right, we got them all seasoned up now. But my next step here is I'm going to add just a touch of chili powder. not a lot. Just mainly looking for color more than we are flavor. Now that those are all seasoned up, we're gonna let them rest in the refrigerator and kind of let them marinate in that dry rub. Now, normally in doing a dish like this, I would want to dredge them in flour to get a nice crispiness on it, but being that I'm trying to watch my carb intake and trying to live a more keto style life, I'm not going to do that today. I am going to consider, though, another alternative is cornstarch. Cornstarch does have, some carbs to it, but what you can do is lightly dredge it in a little bit of cornstarch. It'll help get that, nice crispy sear on it at the same time without killing yourself when it comes to your carb intake. So now that these are all seasoned up, we're going to pop them in the fridge until we're ready to sear them. In the meantime, I'm going to get all my other ingredients ready and together. So that's going to be our chopped garlic, our onion, our shallot, and then after that's all ready to rock and roll, we can start searing. Now I'm serving this tonight with my all-time favorite, basmati rice. So that's where that Indian comes in as well. But we're going to serve it with basmati rice, and then I'm going to probably do some charred corn on the cob that will end up actually cutting off the cob and then mixing it with some other seasonings as well. All right, but stay tuned and we'll get to getting our other ingredients ready. All right, and because we've done this time and time again, I'm not going to go through this too much, but you know the drill on the garlic. I like to cut off the end first, kind of roll it back. That's going to help us peel that skin off. But when it comes to the garlic and shallot today, we're going to be using heavy garlic. I'm going to use about half this amount of shallot and about half the amount of onion. But the garlic is really what we want to come through real good today. So I'm gonna finish peeling this, start chopping up those onions, shallots, and garlic, and then we'll get back to making the dish itself. All right, so again, cleaning it up, and we'll get back to it shortly. So as I was saying earlier, we got our half onion as well as our half shallot. And when it comes to the shallot itself, normally I like to do like a really nice fine dice on it. But today, I'm going to do more of a chop on it just because you got to remember that just like a red onion will have that real slippery skin in between each layer, which will make it a little difficult. Plus, I don't need the shallot to be visually appealing today. It's just more for flavor than anything. And then we'll do a real small fine dice on the onion as well. But all the flavors of this is going to come through really good. So again, just as I always do, you want to crush the garlic first to release those oils. It's going to make it way more flavorful. So again, as you've seen me do this time and time again, we're not going to spend too much time watching me chop up these vegetables, but I just want to let you know that's how we need to do it today for this dish. I'm getting it good and chopped up here. Mince it as fine as you possibly can. All right, garlic done. Chopped so fine, minced so fine, it's almost like a paste. Go ahead and set that aside. Then we're going to cut up our shallot next. Try to keep it in a nice small dice, or as the French like to call it, brunoise. And again, we're not looking for aesthetics in the shallot, so if it gets a little chunky, not a big deal, because we're going to come back at it and chop it up just like we do the garlic. Like a nice fine mince on it. I just like to do it this way to start because of the layers of it. Unlike garlic, the shallot does have layers like an onion. So this will help you at least get it started. But as you can see as I'm cutting here, it's got a super fine dice to it. And then I'm just going to come back at it the opposite way and chop it up. So we can get it almost looking exactly like that garlic looks. So that goes way quicker than the garlic, obviously due to the fact that the dice on that shallot, when I did it real fine just now, is basically gets you about halfway there. So that's just about ready. And be cautious too, shallots do make you tear up a bunch. So be careful when you're doing this. Now, I've tried every method in the world that any chef has ever taught me about trying to avoid that. I do not know one solution that actually works. So we're going to chop it up fine like so, and then I'm going to start fine dicing the onion. Now to the onion, I'm using a sweet Vidalia style onion. And again, we want a really small dice on this. Not as small as the shallot, but pretty darn close. And then we're not going to chop it up like I did the other two. We're going to keep it with some structure in the dice. That way it looks nice and presentable. And we're going to be sauteing or sweating these out in stages too. And the reason behind that is because of the burning of each of these are on a different level. The garlic will be first to burn, and then so would the sweet Vidalia onion. Shallot's kind of in between there. But if we add it in stages, that'll help us sweat it out, and then it'll also, like, when we add the garlic to the pan, it'll sweat it out. We'll add the shallot immediately behind that, sweat it out, and then when we add those onions, it's going to help cool it enough to not burn the shallot and garlic there. So again, nice fine dice on this guy. Not as fine as the shallot, but still pretty small. I guess my dogs are looking at squirrels again. Don't mind them. And like so. So we want that nice fine dice like that. And that is ready to rock and roll. So again, once we get them in the pan, start sweating them out, we'll build the sauce in the pan after we sear the chicken. And the chicken will be the first thing we start. So I just want to show real quick as well the method that we're going to be using to cooking our corn today, which is kind of different, but it's also the same way that we were cooking the chilies the other day. So I'm going to use my gas stove, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these on the burners there and get a nice char on the outside, and then we're going to actually cut the corn off of the cob. It's just easier to eat that way, but I do want to get a nice, char on the outside there. So I just want to show you real quick what that's going to look like. And then once I get it nice and charred up, I'll show you what the result is. And then we'll put it in a bowl and just mix it with some basic seasoning, some butter, some salt and pepper. We're not going to jazz it up too crazy. You do want to be careful because there will be some snapping, crackling, and popping, but don't worry, it's all going to be good. So I'll show you what those look like when they're all finished up. So as you can see, we're getting a nice char on the outside there. Once we get it all charred all the way around, I'm going to let it finish in our toaster oven. I'm not going to crank it up too high, but we want to leave it in there about 10-15 minutes just to finish cooking, and then we'll cut it off that cob and set it aside. Alright, good and charred, now I'm finishing in the toaster oven. Alright, so as I was saying earlier, I'm going to add a little bit of cornstarch to this chicken. And I'm just going to dust it with it because, like I said, while it was in the refrigerator with the seasonings on there, they did kind of, get a little more wet due to the fact that that salt will release the moisture in the chicken. So I'm just going to lightly dust these on the side over here while I get my pan nice and hot. We also are going to be using some olive oil to start. But as we build our sauce in the pan, after we pull them out, we're going to go with some butter as well as some white wine, and then we're going to use some chicken stock as well, and that's going to kind of be able to help us get a nice silky flavor to that sauce. And we're just going to reduce it in the pan. We're not going to add any thickener to it of any kind. That way it'll just reduce down by itself, and we won't need to add any more carbs than we already are by dusting these with the cornstarch. So again, just a light dusting. It says about 7 grams of carbs per tablespoon, and I bet you I've used maybe a tablespoon on the whole lot of chicken, so it's not going to really kill us in the carb area. You can hear me clicking around. I'm just patting it down on these chicken thighs to the side over here, making sure they're coated a little bit. We're not dredging it like we would the flour like I had mentioned earlier. And we're just waiting for our pan to get hot. So once it gets hot, we'll start frying. Alright, some olive oil in the pan as I had said earlier. You don't want a ton, but you want enough that it's not going to get all soaked up by the chicken thighs. And our pan's getting nice and hot there. We want about, a medium heat or so. We don't want to crank it up too much because we don't want to burn it. In fact, I would say on this recipe, we probably want to go a little lower in temperature on that flame than we would traditionally. And that's just because we're not trying to cook the crap out of it. We're just trying to get it cooked so it has a nice sear. And then we'll finish it in the sauce after we build the sauce in the pan. So let's see here. Yeah, let it get a little hotter there and then we'll start. Alright, pan's nice and hot. And start laying these in there evenly as possible. Already getting a nice sizzle. And we want to try to fit all of this in this pan, which it's going to be about just under 2 pounds of chicken thigh. So it's going to be a tight fit. We might have to stack a little bit for a minute so we can get them to shrink up a little. But just try to do your best to get them all in there. Because when we do add them back in with the sauce. It's going to be the perfect size, and it'll fit all together, and it'll help that sauce reach over the actual chicken thighs, so it's nice and seasoned. So we'll just keep that going for a little bit. We'll turn them in a couple seconds. I'll show you what we get on a nice sear on the outside of it. Getting a nice sizzle there. Little tip as well, when you're trying to sear something, don't move it around too much. The more you move it, the more you flip it around, the less time it has to actually caramelize the sugars that are in the meat or whatever you're trying to sear. So you don't want to overdo it, flipping it back and forth, because that will not get you the desired crispiness that you're trying to look for on the outside of that chicken. Alright, so we're about at that halfway mark. I'm just going to go ahead and check them. Not necessarily ready to flip. Oh yeah, we're getting some nice color on there. Just want to check each one, make sure it's working out. And they look like they're doing pretty well. So I'm going to give it like another minute on this side, then we're going to flip it to the other side. Now when we do try to sear the other side, we're not trying to overdo it either, because we want to be able to finish it in the sauce. So we're going to just get a nice quality sear on this side, flip it over for like a minute or two, and then pull them out of the pan so we can start building the sauce. Alright, we can see how it looks now that we flipped it. Looking nice and crispy. We're going to let it go for a couple minutes on this side, and then we will pull them out. Alright, I'm going to try to get these out of here without blocking the light. So we're going to let that pan still stay hot. We're going to pull these chicken thighs out and just set them aside. Try not to stack them too much. I know you might have to do a little bit of stacking, but you don't want to get too much moisture going on there. Alright, so now that the pan's getting nice and hot again, we're going to start adding our ingredients like I was saying earlier. We're going to start with the garlic. Get that in the pan. We'll let that go for a minute or two. Get those oils going there. And it's already starting to sear up pretty good, so again, we don't want to burn the garlic, so I'm going to go ahead and add the shallot right away as well. And mind you, as soon as you add this stuff, it's going to cool the pan down a little bit, but not tremendously. So before that garlic starts to get too overdone, I'm going to go ahead and mix in that shallot. And you'll be able to start smelling those flavors from the onion, shallot, and garlic here. It smells amazing. Now that that's sweated out just a bit, like I was saying, next we're going to add our onion. You don't need to add any more oil. There should have been plenty of oil from earlier. All that olive oil. So we'll get these onions, garlic, and shallots sweated down a bit. And then we will get the drippings off the pan via about, I don't know, I would say about, less than a quarter cup of white wine. And again, I'm using Pinot Grigio today. And then after we do that, we're going to go ahead and add our chicken stock. We're going to reduce all those down step by step. So again, once these get all sweated out, we will add the white wine. Now that they're almost sweated out, I'm also going to add my rosemary now. Make sure it's clean. I use fresh rosemary from our planter outside. So we want to rinse it off really good. Fresh is best, but you always want to be cautious of any bugs or anything like that that might have been crawling around on there. So I'm going to toss that in there. That's also going to start releasing some of the oils and flavors of the rosemary as it's in there with the garlic, onion, and shallot. And you'll start to smell that rosemary as well. So again, kind of a fusion dish today using chicken thigh meat. Chicken thigh is by far my favorite. It has the most flavor, the most tenderness, the most juiciness. It just, all around, it's the best part of the chicken in my opinion. So we'll let that sweat down a bit more, maybe get a little color on some of that garlic and shallot. And then we will add our white wine. And we'll squeeze half a lemon in there as well. Let that reduce down. Then we'll add our chicken stock. Let that reduce down a bit, and then finish with the butter and the cream. Alright, so now we're going to add our white wine. So I guess I'm adding about half a cup. And that will help it, reduce down a little bit more. That way you're not burning that garlic and stuff. And then don't forget to add the half a lemon of juice. And when we do that, we definitely want to be cautious of the seeds. We don't want those entering our dish. And we're just going to let this reduce down for a little bit. And then we'll add our chicken stock, and then we'll let that reduce down a little bit. Again, if you do it in stages, it just adds dimension to the actual flavor of the sauce. If you add it all together at once, you're not going to get the same flavor dynamic. I know that sounds a little crazy, but that's just the way it works. Got to reduce down your white wine, your lemon juice, the acidity first. Add your chicken stock, reduce that down a bit. Add your butter and cream at the end to finish the sauce. And then we'll place our chicken thighs back in there on a real low simmer just to finish off. You can see it's really rolling now, it's starting to reduce down. And let that keep going until it's about half to 2/3 reduced. And we'll add the stock. Alright, you can start hearing the sound difference from the simmer, just checking it by stirring. Just want to make sure we're not reducing it too much. The real only factor to reducing it too much is you'll start to burn the garlic and onions and stuff. It's not going to hurt it if it reduces down to what they call in French au sec, which means like very reduced. But we're getting real close to where we want to be. Alright, think that reduced down enough. That's also going to help sweat out more of the flavor from the garlic, shallots, and onion. Now I'm going to add about a cup of chicken stock. Maybe a touch more than that. And again, now we're going to reduce the stock down. And after the stock is reduced a bit, then we can test for seasoning. We'll check the salt and pepper level in there. I know we're going to need some of both. I might add a little white pepper because I added so much of the black pepper to the chicken thigh itself. But just let this reduce down. We want to let it reduce down to, let's say about half on this. And then we'll add that touch of cream as well. Alright, chicken stock reduced down by about half. And now I'm going to go ahead and add my cream. About a 1/4 cup of cream there. Make sure that disperses evenly. Alright, and because we're adding more liquid to the mix, we're going to want to reduce that cream down now. So again, it's got to be done in stages or it just will not taste the way it should. So we're going to reduce that cream down a little bit. Once we do that, we'll add our raw butter, which just means cold butter. And then we'll get that whisked in and we'll pop back in our chicken thighs and let it reduce a little bit more, simmering on a low temp. And same as the stock, we want to reduce the cream down to about half. And at this stage, I'm going to add a bit of some crushed red pepper. It's going to help give it a little kick, but it's not going to be crazy spicy. But you don't need to add that too early, otherwise you're going to lose a lot of that flavor. So I like to add it like midway through the sauce being finished, and those flavors will start leaching out of the chilies. And lastly, before I add the butter, I'm going to add some guajillo and red jalapeno puree. It's going to give it a little bit more flavor as well as color. Get that mixed through. Again, we're mixing a couple different ethnicities here tonight. Going Southwest Hispanic, typical French processes, and simmered in a sauce very similar to like an Indian style, because again, it's going over basmati rice. But now that's all about reduced down, I turn the heat completely down, and now I'm going to add my cold raw butter in. And you want to move this around a bunch because you don't want it to sit too long or get too hot. What happens if the butter gets too hot, it'll break. What that means is the oils will start separating from the solids and it won't be silky smooth, but I mean, don't be upset if it does break. It's very possible. You always want to make sure that you're not at a screaming hot temperature. That'll help. Also, when you reduce that cream down, that'll also help stabilize the butter. But I mean, the possibility of it breaking is probably pretty good, so don't stress it. It's all about aesthetics and how it looks. Try to keep it as smooth and creamy as possible, but more important than that, at the house, it's all about the flavor. That sauce is delicious. So with the butter incorporated, I'm going to start adding back the chicken thighs. And we're just going to nestle them in that sauce there. And these are going to finish cooking as well then in the sauce. And we're going to go actually to a different burner as well after this. We're not going to leave it on the big burner. We want to put it on an even smaller burner because we're just trying to get that what you would call finishing. So we're going to take it off this heat here. I'm going to put a lid on it. And we're going to move it over to a smaller burner at a low heat. We're just going to let it finish like that until it's done. We'll get our rice made, and then I will be able to show you the video of it being plated.